Hello, guys and gals. Welcome back. This week, unfortunately, I didn't find myself with a lot of time. Apologies. As you can see from the title, I decided to do a noteworthy request, as I don't normally edit those too much. For those of you not familiar with the concept, the Noteworthy series is where I take a viewer's request of a popular track and we break down what's going on with the MIDI and the musical principles. This request is from Herman, who requested we break down Paul Woolford's Heat. Let's go. Okie dokie, so I've got a little recreation going on here. I'll give you a preview. Here's the original. The drop is here. There's the original. I've not had time to fully match everything, but the notes are all in the right place, so that's the main thing. So what we're dealing with, Heat, Paul Woolford, is in C sharp minor. We're at 122 BPM. I've basically recreated the arrangement, most of the important bits anyway. Let's take you through the bits as they come along. So we start with piano and kick section. So, disclosure for those of you confused, I did say C sharp minor, correct? I've done my usual trick of transposing everything so that we are looking in A minor instead of C sharp minor, so we don't have to learn any minor keys. We just have to be concerned with all the white notes. Nice and simple to look at. So, as you can see, here's our main piano riff. Let me solo this. So, as you can see, we can use the bass notes to tell us where these chords are going. So we start on chord 6. Our first chord is chord 6. Next, chord 7. Then we land on the 1, chord 1, and chord 4. So it's a 6, 7, 1, 4 progression. Up here we have the upper voicings for the chord. And I'm going to go over how you get to this place because there's some interesting extensions going on here, as is typical with Mr. Woolford. So here is a typical standard triad version of 6, 7, 1, 4. Okay. So the first thing we do is, as you might find typical of a lot of these tutorials now, there's a double octave in the bass. That goes for all of the chords. The bass doesn't fall the chord down, the bass actually goes up. So that's the only kind of difference there. So that's our starting point. That's the foundations of a 6, 7, 1, 4. Let's look at what Paul has done. Now we have a 7th for the first chord, but it's voiced differently to this. We don't have the root in the upper chord. We've got that in the bass now, not needed. He's chosen the 5th of the chord, this one here, as his kind of top melody. So this one gets tucked under. We revoice this 7th to go down the octave. So this is our first chord voicing. Again, pretty typical of house. It's more common for either the fifth or the third of the chord to be at the top. You find a lot these days, at least. Anyway. And I'm going to skip chord 7 for now because I just want to show that the same thing happens to chord 1 over here, our 1 chord. We no longer have the root, and the 7th goes underneath. So the principle behind chord 1 here and chord 6 is basically the same. Chord 7 changes things up. You might have heard me say in previous videos that we don't 7th the chord 7. Don't 7 a 7. It's a good kind of rule of thumb. And the reason is, it sounds a bit weird. Chord 7 in a minor key, when you add a 7th to it, this becomes what's called a dominant 7. And it's absolutely fine if we were to just resolve that to a C major chord. Hear how this F would like to go to this E up here. I can voice it any way I like, doesn't matter. But that's the role in general of a dominant 7th chord. This is supposed to be chord 5 to this chord 1. So when this isn't chord 5, because it's not, this is chord 7 in A minor, this doesn't really work as well into our minor chord 1. So you'll find not a lot of chord 7s have a 7th on them. But Paul Woolford does like his extra crunch. He does like his non-triads. He likes to add something extra. And what he's done is he's just basically kept this common tone of this E. Note 5. Now, what role does that have in chord 7? So if we look at how we would build chord 7, this would be the 7th here. So this is a 6. Because remember, in a chord, you've got 1, 3, and 5. And then you normally build upwards with 7, 9, 11, etc., etc. You go miss 1, press 1, miss 1, press 1. So he's basically added a 6 here, which is an odd choice. But we can see kind of the logic. Also, he deletes this note here. We don't need the 5th, apparently. Probably keeping it to 3 notes in the right hand, if you're thinking of it in terms of piano player logic. And when you see that he also moves this note 5 down the octave for our chord 1, you see the running theme here now. So chord 7 becomes a 6th version of itself with no 3rd, which would be this note. It would be G6, no 3rd. Well, I tell a lie. The original is in C sharp, isn't it? So this would become B. B6, no 3rd in the actual track. We're just watching this in a different key for simplicity's sake. I hope that's not too confusing for everyone. Keeping this in A minor visually only. Right, so we've kind of got the reason why he would choose this note for his addition to chord 7. Our chord 1 that we resolved to is now standard 7th, but we've moved the 5 and the 7 underneath. So the 3 is left at the top this time. And then for the chord 4 on our turnaround, it does add an extra note, but it's not the 7th, which would make sense because of this. Be nothing wrong with that. Paul decides to add a 9th. So this is an add 9th. You probably wanted the lift from this melody here of the instead of it staying down. Just a little less, little less of a good mood if you don't lift on that last chord. I can kind of see why I might have heard that as being a better choice. Why not keep the 7th in? Who knows? Probably just to distinguish and keep the melody separate, so it's obvious that it sits there alone. And just a little bit of chord trivia for you. In the wild world of chord naming schemes, if you put the 9th on but the 7th isn't present anymore, we call that an add 9. So anytime you see, for example, this would be D minor add 9. If you see just D minor 9th, that always implies that the 7th note is in there. Every note would be in there. 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 would be in D minor 9. If you see D minor add 9, it means the standard triad is there, and the 9th has been stuck on top, no 7ths. That is the difference. Just in case you ever wondered. And if you're now asleep, I apologize. You're going to miss this next bit. But the only other thing, we've got the classic high string. It's just a high string held on the 1. I have added an extra sine wave on my lower piano notes. I don't know if that's what he's done in his record. It could just be the fact that his piano sample is a lot meatier than mine in the lower octaves. But I just did that to kind of match the frequency spectrum a little better to his record. So that's how we start. Then we add these string part, this string stabs. And you'll notice those are on the same notes as the top end of the piano melody. So note 3, 4, 3, and 5 of the scale. As you can see, that's what he's left at the top. So you can see where those have come from. Rhythmically, however, they're not the same. If you look at the piano rhythm, sorry, I didn't go into the full piano rhythm riff, did I? We've got the 90s thing going on where instead of all the notes landing together, we have some staggered bass notes of the piano. And that rhythm is the same for all 4 of the chord changes. So, on the kick drums for the first 2, we have this little syncopated section here, either side of the bar line, landing back on the kicks. Well, the right hand is anyway, the top notes. I would class this, the higher notes as the dominant rhythm, and the early bass ones are kind of fillers. It's not the other way around. This isn't the main rhythm, and these bounce off that. I hear these as the bouncy notes, and this is the main riff, which your ears do anyway, because as I've said before, ears are wired for melody, so you're hearing this more than you're hearing this. You're hearing the top more than you are any of the rest of the chord. So the strings do not do that. We're just one on every kick drum. So that's the beginning. We go into a verse section.
Calling out Saturday Night Fire.
It's pretty simple. It's just vocal, clap, and piano. But the piano has changed. To chill out the verse, we've moved to a more acoustic piano than our dancey kind of fake piano. This needs to be high energy, lots of harshness. You can't really get that over a real piano. In the verse, we've got this. It's played softer, so it's less bright. And it's on a more realistic sample. Speaking in terms of sounds, I've not managed to match his exactly. I'm not sure what Paul Woolford uses for a piano. But I got pretty close just by doing the old trick of matching a really fake one. Like, obviously, we've got our Chord M1 laid in here. The classic from my Piano House video. We've still got the slick EQ on it. The Criminal M1 sample from my Piano House sound video. That's still in there. It's up the octave because for some reason that sample is an octave too low. Same thing before, we've got stereo width on and a little bit of OTT. This EQ madness here is just trying to match it to the record a little bit better. And the layer I've put with that to be slightly more realistic is basically just looking for some kind of sustained mids. If you listen to the difference between these two, I just really want the top bite off that M1. Some of that low growl you get from putting the bass in octaves. Very unique to the M1. And then the Ableton's own piano just on full brightness and hardness. It's not exactly realistic, but it's not exactly super fake either. It's a nice kind of layer to go with. Pretty much any semi-realistic piano that comes with your DAW will probably do this job. Or the one that comes with contact to stock, you know, that kind of thing. So just fake laid with kind of real-ish is the trick there. Nothing really special going on. For these strings, I'm using the free BBC Orchestra from Spitfire. We know the ones. And while we're here, actually, just a word on articulations. You'll find this comes up with string samples a lot. So this would be, this long note is sustained strings, but strings can be played in a million different ways. So you find lots of different types of samples of strings. These ones, the stabby ones, if you are struggling to find those, you want to look for either the words staccato or spiccato. That means stabby strings in Italian. It's to do with the way they are bowed in when you play the actual instrument. I'm not sure of the exact difference between spiccato and staccato. I've never found a useful nuance difference for our purposes in dance music. But there you go. Spiccato or staccato if you want stabby strings. Actually, I'll show you the difference. What you would get if you don't use the correct articulation. This is what normal kind of sustained strings would sound like. Versus not just a volume difference, it's a complete difference of sound. The way it's attacked, the way it's shorter, punchier. This is long and flowing. This is for sustained lines and pads and things. Spiccato is the punchy, stabby kind of version. Pizzicato is the pizzicato, sorry. Think Insomnia. That's when the strings are plucked. Pizzicato means plucked. Tremolo is hard to demonstrate on quick lines. Let me show you on this line. Tremolo is when they basically vibrate the bow back and forth quickly. Don't know if you can hear that. It's quite subtle. Like playing lots and lots of notes very quickly in a row. It almost sounds like one. That's what tremolo is. So tremolando, actually. is its full word, but there we go. Anyway, so moving on, we've got our acoustic piano. There's a slight difference to the riff in the verse. It's also chilled out, not just in sound, but in playing. We're missing a stab in the middle here. If I show you the original riff here. So it's this. It's as if we've deleted this one. We just delete. Oh, and we get rid of the last bounce. So this is the verse riff, effectively. But played on the much softer piano. So that's what you're seeing here. You can see I've backed off the velocities here, because that affects, if your piano is a good one, it should respond to this. I always reach for Piano Tech for realistic pianos. I absolutely love that plugin. Unfortunately, not free. There's some good free ones in, again, Spitfire Labs. Spitfire's free Labs plugin. If you'd like a soft realistic piano, there's some. I think there's 3 choices in the Labs piano. I just did this in a bit of a rush, so I'm afraid that I don't have free equivalents to everything today. But we get the idea of the arrangement decision. So this verse is chilled out.
Saturday night fire.
Halfway through, we do go back to the original riff, but on the acoustic piano.
I got desire for you to hear me up.
Which is clearly a response to the vocal picking up. That is why that arrangement decision is most likely made. You can see we're chilled out here.
Calling out.
Lots of space between the words.
Saturday night fire.
Long drawn out notes.
I'm burning up. Way beyond desire.
And then as the vocalist picks up the rhythm.
I got desire for you to hear me up. I got that fire.
So does the piano.
You could have it, you could have it. I got desire for you just to hear me up. I got that fire.
I've not programmed the build up, I'm afraid, so we don't get the full arrangement, but we drop to this. So we have our main riff. Nothing changed there. We have our high string. And some additions. Obviously, the full drums come in. And we have a bass. Basically just serving as a sub-bass part. I'll talk about that in a second, sorry. And there's a new top addition. I've used a Rhodes piano for this. Again, just Ableton's built-in one. Oops, mine's a little bit louder than the original. You can just about hear it in there. So any kind of sine wave instrument close to, really pure tones, because it's very high up. It's on it's just note 154, that little melody. Repeats every 2 bars, regardless of the chord. Now the bass is pretty interesting. You heard at the beginning I said we are actually in C sharp. Here's the bass in its original. I've not transposed this into A because I wanted to show the original notes. If you saw my video on which keys are better for dance, I was asking the question, are any keys better for dance music? And some are certainly the case. I kind of made the argument for anything between E and B. which would be below this, between here and here, would be optimal for the best kind of sub-bass area for most speakers. It's very hard for speakers to get below kind of 40 hertz-ish, which is like an E-ish. But we are in C sharp. Our tonal center is C sharp. This would be considered high for dance music, quite bass light. And you can't just throw this down the octave because we get like super too subsonic down there. It's a mess. So there's kind of an interesting solution to that. I've programmed it here in Vital as usual, but the principle is we have our normal sine wave sub bass on the usual octave. But as you can hear, as we go up to that C sharp, F sharp, these last two here, we're not really in good bass, dance bass territory much. It's not too bad, but Paul Woolford's tracks certainly got a lot of bottom end going on down there. And the way they've achieved that is we add a sawtooth, filtered, so it's not very bright at all. We just want the first few harmonics of it. We have this an octave underneath. So this is doing the low notes that we don't really want to exist. It's actually like playing down here, which would be a mess. But what they then do is filter all the sub-frequencies out. So you're just left with the harmonics of that saw. So the ear thinks it's hearing lower notes than it does. That's how psychoacoustics works. It's largely off harmonics. The ear still understands that those harmonics must have come from a lower pitch, even if you can't hear the lower pitch. So you'll see on the spectrum here, we'll take the filter off. We're way down into like 20 hertz-ish. No speaker's going to carry that. But if I remove it, you probably won't hear a difference at all, unless you're in a really good room with really good speakers, with a dedicated subwoofer setup. We get that impression of a super low bass without the problems of actually having to deal with those frequencies. Nice little trick for anyone who's dealing with a higher key. Because you don't always get to choose what key you make a track in. Depends on the vocalist or any existing sample you're working with. I've seen a few Paul Woolford tracks actually in C sharp. I'm not sure if he just prefers that key, as in to play the chords on the piano in that key, or if he just likes the sound of it. Not sure why, but nice bass solution for higher keys. Put your sawtooth an octave down and remove all the actual sub-frequencies. Anyway, moving on. Little breakdown here for the HEAT section. And it's as simple as you would hope. It's mostly the first part of the piano chord, just extended one per bar. It's like I've taken the original piano riff and just done that with each chord. There's only a couple of changes. First two are the same. Our third chord here, when we land on chord 1, is no longer a true chord 1. It used to be here. These would be our original chords. Instead, we have this and this. So there's probably a couple of reasons for this. This is a suspended fourth. This was our minor third. This is what gave the chord its minor status. If you remember how this chord would have been built, it would be this note, and this note. So here is the bit that determines whether we are minor or major. So without that, we are no longer minor. This is what we call a suspended fourth. Still got the seventh in there, obviously. And the reason probably is because the vocal's singing here. The H-E-A-T she's singing is all on note 4. She's here. Turn my piano notes up here. She's there. So it's probably to follow the vocal. Also, the suspense gives us less resolution, which is great for a breakdown because that means we can drop a little bit harder when the chords go back to their proper, especially chord 1. Chord 1 needs to be solid, right? So we go back to our proper chord 1 with its proper minor third in there when we drop. And this suspension, well, keeps us in suspense until it does. So that's a couple of reasons probably for this chord. And then instead of our add 9 lift on chord 4, he has used the 7th for this. And again, probably similar reasons. Maybe we don't want the breakdown to lift as hard as the drop. So we come down instead. So we don't have as much energy kind of moving up. This is a little bit more chill, which is more appropriate for this break section. As for arrangement, we've got both pianos playing this. Well, I have. I think that's what I can hear in his. The hard one for the initial attack, and then the acoustic one for the kind of main substance. The warmth. Our high string is still there. Ever present. And I've added some cellos. Just again playing the piano chords, which is what it's just a piano layer. You can hear it in the original. Again, I've used BBC, but I've swapped it to celli. The cellos there. I should label that correctly, shouldn't I? Cellos. And our pretty twinkly high electronic piano is up here. The Rhodes piano type thing. I'll show you his. So obviously we've got different sounding string sections, but the principle is there. That's just down to different sample libraries. Not a lot we can do about that. Right, what else changes? We drop back to piano and strings and kick. We have a verse section. This time we're running with drums and bass. We have the acoustic piano. It's playing the full riff though, not the chilled out one, probably to keep up with the drums. We go back into a big riff section. And now we have a counter melody to our string melody. I'm not sure I would class this as a melody, but you get the idea. An extra section comes in. So here's our original. And then we have another one comes in now, which is fading in. Everything's in octaves here, by the way, sorry. It's just note 1, note 1, note 1 octave. Note 5, 7. Hear those together. It's pretty subtle in the original, but it is exposed at the end. basically that's brought in from here onwards. And we go back to the break section with the sustain chords. The only change here is the lower octave is removed for the first half of the bass notes. There's no double octave underneath, even in the strings as far as I can tell. So we get and then that's added halfway through. So we get a shift to the lower octaves for more build-up intensity. Add the lower octave. Sorry, that's the lower octave there. Back into the chorus. The only other difference for the rest of the track, this post-chorus vocal that comes in, they make a slight change to the electronic piano high twinkly bit. It basically becomes a question and answer. They add an extra note. And it's not every 2 bars now, it's just halfway through the chord progression. Interesting why they didn't choose to put that a bar later when there is no vocal. But nitpicking, I suppose, there. Doesn't really matter in the great scheme of things. That's where I would have put it. But there you go. That's all the elements to Paul Woolford's Heat. So, there we have it. The noteworthy bits of Paul Woolford's Heat. I hope you learned something. If you did, you know what to do. Hit like. Or if you're feeling extra generous, hit sub. Leave me any comments. Tell me what your takeaways are from this, or if you've got any questions, or if you'd like us to do a original track in this style as a part 2, maybe. Let me know. And until I get a sign-off slogan, I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.